My name is Elena Carter. And my mother threw my son's painting into the trash in front of our entire family because she said it looked cheap. It happened at her 64th birthday dinner. In the dining room, she had spent 2 weeks preparing for photographs. Crystal glasses, white roses, gold-rimmed plates, candles tall enough to make everyone look softer than they were. My mother, Vivian Hartley, loved beauty as long as it came with a receipt people could admire. My younger sister Monica arrived first with a velvet box from a designer jeweler, and Mom opened it with both hands pressed to her chest, pretending she had not already guessed it was expensive. "Monica," she breathed, lifting the diamond bracelet toward the light. "This is too much." But her smile said it was exactly enough. Everyone clapped. My son Theo stood beside me, holding his gift wrapped in brown craft paper and tied with blue string. He was 16, tall for his age, quiet in rooms where adults measured worth by volume. He had spent 3 months working on that painting. I knew because I had found him at midnight more than once, sitting at the kitchen table with paint on his wrists, mixing colors in chipped bowls because he said store-bought green never looked like memory. The painting was of my mother's old house before she renovated it into something colder. The porch swing was there. The crooked maple tree was there. The upstairs window where she used to stand when I came home from school was there too, though Theo had painted it slightly dark, like the house was looking away. He called it Grandmother's Window. He had not told me the title until that morning. "Do you think she'll like it?" he asked in the car. I had smiled and said, "She should." I hated myself later for saying should instead of will. After Monica's bracelet, after my cousin's spa certificate, after my uncle's imported wine, Theo stepped forward with his carefully wrapped painting. "Happy birthday, Grandma," he said softly. Vivian looked at the package before she looked at him. That was the first cut. "Oh," she said. "How sweet. Homemade." The word landed on the table like a napkin someone had dropped. A few relatives smiled politely. Monica glanced at me, then away. Theo's ears turned red. "I made it for you," he said. My mother peeled back the paper slowly, already bracing herself to be gracious about something she had decided would disappoint her. When the painting appeared, the room went quiet. Not because it was bad, because it was honest. The old house stared out from the canvas with all its shadows and warmth. Every brushstroke carrying something Theo had seen in family photographs and stories I had told him when he was little. For 1 second, my mother's face changed. I saw recognition. Then pride killed it. She gave a small laugh. "Well," she said, holding the canvas at arm's length, "that's certainly emotional." Theo swallowed. "It's your old house. I can see that." Her smile sharpened. "Though I'm not sure why you made it look so gloomy." "I didn't mean to." "No. Of course not." She turned the painting slightly, as if checking whether money might be hidden on the back. "You know, sweetheart, at your age, presentation matters. If you're going to give a gift, it should look finished." My hand tightened around my napkin. "Mom." She ignored me. "Monica brought something lovely because she understands effort." Theo's shoulders folded inward. "I worked hard on it." My mother sighed. The way she sighed when a waiter brought the wrong mineral water. "I'm sure you did. But I don't have space for every little school project." The room froze. I stood. "Do not call it that." Vivian looked at me with public patience. The expression she used when she wanted everyone to see how difficult I was. "Elena, don't start. I'm just being honest." Theo reached for the painting. "It's okay. I can take it back." That should have been the end of it. She could have handed it over. She could have said thank you and hidden it in a closet like a normal cruel person. Instead, My mother turned toward the silver trash bin near the sideboard and slid the canvas inside like she was clearing wrapping paper. "There," she said lightly. "No need to make a scene over cheap trash." Something in me went completely still. Theo made no sound, which was worse than crying. Around the table, no one moved. Not Monica. Not my uncle. Not the cousins who had watched my son offer his heart with both hands and seen my mother throw it away because it did not glitter. I walked to the trash bin, lifted the painting out, and brushed a speck of tissue paper from the corner. Then I turned to my mother and smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. Calmly. "Thank you for showing him what your approval is worth." Her face tightened. "Excuse me," I took Theo's hand. It was cold. "We're leaving." Vivian gave a little laugh. Nervous now, because control was slipping. "Elena, don't be dramatic." I looked at the diamond bracelet shining on her wrist, then at the painting under my arm. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm taking out the only valuable thing you put in the trash." Theo walked beside me without looking back. Behind us. My mother said my name once, sharp and embarrassed. But I did not stop. I carried my son's painting out of that perfect dining room. Past the white roses. Past the candles. Past a family too polite to defend a child. My mother thought she had thrown away a cheap homemade gift. She had no idea she had just thrown away the only thing in that room with real value. Theo did not cry until we reached the car. That was what hurt me most. He held himself together all the way down my mother's front steps. Past the stone planters. Past the cars, lined neatly along the curb. Past the glowing windows where our relatives were probably deciding whether I had ruined Mom's birthday or whether Mom had gone too far. He climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. I placed the painting carefully in the back. Face up. Like something injured but still alive. Then I got behind the wheel. Closed the door. And the silence became too small for both of us. Theo stared straight ahead. His hands were clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles had gone white. "Was it really that bad?" he asked. I turned toward him so fast, my seatbelt locked. "No." He blinked once. A tear slipped down his cheek. Quiet and immediate. Like it had been waiting for permission. She hated it. Your grandmother hates anything she cannot price in front of other people. "Mom." "No," I said. Gentler now. But firm. "Listen to me. That painting was not bad. It was honest." She did not know what to do with honest. He looked out the window toward the house. Through the curtains. I could see movement in the dining room. No one came outside. Not one person. I shouldn't have given it to her. He whispered. I thought maybe because it was her old house. His voice cracked. And my heart folded around the sound. For 3 months. Theo had worked on that canvas. He had asked me about the color of the old porch swing. About the maple tree. About whether the upstairs window faced east or west. He had studied faded family photos until the corners curled under his fingers. He had tried to paint not the house my mother had renovated, but the house she had once lived in before money became her favorite language. You gave her something. No one else in that room gave her. I said, you gave her attention. Theo wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket. Monica gave her diamonds. Monica gave her exactly what she wanted. And I gave her trash. Do not use her word for your work. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Theo flinched. And I softened immediately. I'm sorry. I'm not angry at you. But don't repeat cruelty like it's truth just because someone older handed it to you. He nodded. But I could see the damage moving through him. Settling into places I could not reach with one-car conversation. That was what people like my mother never understood. Humiliation did not end when the room stopped laughing. Sometimes it followed a child home and unpacked itself in his chest. I started the car but did not drive yet. Theo, look at me. He did. Reluctantly. His eyes were red. You never have to make her anything again. His mouth trembled. But she's Grandma. She was Grandma when you handed her the painting. He stared at me. And I saw the sentence land. Not as comfort. Exactly. As permission. He did not have to keep auditioning for someone who had thrown his heart into a trash bin. I pulled away from the curb without looking back at the house. Halfway home, Theo said, "Can we not tell anyone at school?" Of course. And can we put the painting somewhere else? Not in my room. Where do you want it? He shrugged. I don't know. I don't want to look at it right now. Okay. When we got home, he went straight upstairs. I heard his bedroom door close softly, which somehow hurt more than if he had slammed it. I stood in the living room with the painting in my hands. Under our warm apartment light, it looked different than it had in my mother's dining room. Not expensive. Not polished in the way Vivian Hartley understood, polish, but alive. The old house seemed to lean away from its own window. The porch swing hung slightly crooked. The maple tree bent toward the roof like it was trying to listen. There was pain in it. Yes. But there was also tenderness. A child had painted a woman's home with more compassion than that woman had shown him. I carried it to the kitchen table and looked closely for damage. A faint smear of frosting marked the bottom corner from the trash bin. A strip of gold tissue paper had stuck to the frame. I cleaned it with the same care I used when Theo was small and came home with scraped knees he pretended did not hurt. Then I set the canvas against the wall behind my desk, facing inward, because Theo had asked not to see it. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I sat beside his bed for a while. His sketchbook was open on the floor. Several pages had been torn out. I picked up one scrap from the trash and saw only a corner of a painted window before I put it back. Some wounds were not mine to inspect without permission. My phone buzzed just after midnight. A text from Monica. Mom is upset. You embarrassed her in front of everyone. I looked toward Theo's closed door. Then typed back, good. Monica replied almost instantly. That's cruel. I stared at the word until it became absurd. Cruel was not leaving a birthday dinner. Cruel was a grandmother throwing away a boy's gift and calling it cheap trash while the family watched in silence. I did not answer again. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for art restoration and custom framing near me. I did not know what I was looking for yet. I only knew that my son's painting deserved to be cleaned, protected, and held by something better than my mother's approval. 6 months later, the world would call that decision instinct. That night, it was just a mother refusing to let a trash bin have the final word. I learned early that my mother's love came with a price tag. And if she could not display the receipt, she did not know where to put the feeling. Vivian Hartley had not always been rich. But she had always behaved like poverty was a disease other people caught through weak character. By the time I was 12, I understood that homemade gifts made her smile tighter than store-bought ones. By the time I was 16, I understood that apologies mattered less to her than appearances. By the time I was 38, sitting at my kitchen table with my son's wounded painting turned toward the wall, I understood that she had not changed at all. She had only upgraded the room where she judged us. My younger sister Monica learned Mom's language fluently. Designer handbags, spa weekends, diamond tennis bracelets wrapped in velvet. She married a real estate developer, moved into a house with columns, and started giving Mom gifts that came with brand names large enough to substitute for affection. Mom adored her for it. Monica understands effort, she used to say, usually while looking at me across a holiday table as if my entire life were a poorly wrapped present. I was the divorced daughter, the practical one, the one who drove a reliable used car, worked in nonprofit administration, clipped coupons without shame, and raised Theo in a 2-bedroom apartment filled with books, paint, and furniture we had assembled ourselves. To my mother, simplicity was not a style. It was evidence. Love is nice. Elena. She once told me when I brought soup after her dental surgery instead of sending expensive flowers. But money proves effort. I had been too tired then to answer properly. I simply put the soup in her refrigerator and left before I said something that would become family gossip by morning. That was how Vivian operated. She wounded privately, then performed injury publicly if you bled where people could see. When Theo was little, I tried to shield him from it by explaining Grandma was particular. Particular about restaurants. Particular about gifts. Particular about clothes. Posture. Manners. Schools. Neighborhoods. And whether Theo's hair looked artistic or unkempt, depending on who else was listening. But children are better historians than adults admit. Theo noticed the way Grandma praised Monica's stepchildren for piano lessons, but called his sketching a phase. He noticed how she displayed the silver-framed school portrait Monica gave her. While the clay bird he made in 4th grade disappeared from the mantel after one afternoon, he noticed, and then he tried harder. That was the part that hurt. He did not reject her. He studied her. He asked what colors she liked. He asked if she missed her old house. He asked why she had replaced the porch swing in the photos with stone planters and why she never talked about Grandpa Hartley except when guests asked. I thought he was curious because he loved old family stories. Only later did I realize he was gathering pieces for the painting. He was building a bridge to a woman who had never once crossed the room for him. The morning after her birthday dinner, Theo stayed in his room until almost noon. I made pancakes because they had been his favorite when he was small, then left a plate outside his door like an offering to a shy animal. At 1, he came out wearing yesterday's hoodie and an expression too blank for 16. I'm going to throw away some old sketches, he said. I set my coffee down. Why? He shrugged. They're taking up space. My mother's voice echoed in my head. I don't have space for every little school project. I walked carefully toward him. Theo. It's fine. It is not fine if you are cleaning out your art because she was cruel. His jaw tightened. Maybe she was right about presentation. She was wrong about value. That's easy for you to say because you're my mom. No. I said. It's easy for me to say because I have eyes. He almost smiled. But pain pulled it back. I don't want to talk about it. Okay. That was one thing I had promised myself. After leaving my mother's house, I would not make Theo perform healing for my comfort. If he needed silence, I would not fill it with speeches. If he needed anger, I would not rename it disrespect. He returned to his room, and I stood in the hallway listening to paper move. Each rustle making me feel like Mom was still throwing things away through him. That afternoon, Monica called. I almost ignored it. But some old, stupid part of me still believed family silence needed translation. You need to apologize to Mom, she said before. Hello? I looked at Theo's closed door. For what? For humiliating her at her birthday. I laughed once. Monica. She threw a child's painting into the trash. She didn't mean it like that. How many meanings does cheap trash have? Monica sighed. The polished sigh of someone who had never paid full price for peace because someone else in the family always covered the difference. Theo is sensitive. Mom is from a different generation. Mom is from a generation that understands trash bins. You always make everything dramatic. There it was. The family script. Vivian acted. I reacted. And somehow the reaction became the event. I lowered my voice. Tell Mom she doesn't have to worry. Theo will never make her another gift. Monica went quiet. That's harsh. No. I said. That's protection. I hung up before she could explain my mother to me in softer lighting. Then I walked to my desk and turned the painting around. Grandmother's window looked back at me. Dark and tender. Wounded but not ruined. My mother had taught me what it felt like to be measured and found cheap. I would be damned if I let her teach my son the same lesson, without showing him there was another court of judgment beyond her dining room. Somewhere, I thought, there had to be a frame strong enough to hold what she had tried to discard. The framing shop was tucked between a dry cleaner and a bakery on Ashford Street, the kind of place I had driven past 100 times without noticing, because my life usually had no room for custom anything. Its front window displayed wedding portraits, antique maps, pressed flowers, and a charcoal sketch of a woman's hands that made me stop for half a second before I opened the door. A bell rang above us. Theo stood beside me with his hood pulled up even though it was not raining. He had agreed to come only because I promised we were not showing the painting for opinions. We were only getting it cleaned and framed. Protected. That word had worked when encouragement did not. The shop smelled like wood, paper, and lemon oil. Behind the counter, a woman with silver hair and red glasses looked up from measuring a photograph. "Good morning." "Hi," I said, suddenly nervous in a way I had not expected. "We have a canvas that needs cleaning. Maybe framing too." Theo shifted beside me. I held grandmother's window wrapped in brown paper against my chest. The woman gestured to a padded work table. "Let's take a look." Theo stared at the floor. "Mom, maybe we should just, we're only asking about cleaning." I reminded him softly. He nodded once, but his shoulders stayed tight. I laid the painting on the table and unwrapped it. For a moment, the woman said nothing. She leaned closer. Not with the polite smile adults use for children's art, but with attention. Real attention. She adjusted the lamp above the table. The old house emerged under the light, the crooked porch swing, the dark upstairs window, the maple tree bending toward the roof. The layers of green and gray Theo had mixed until the canvas looked less painted than remembered. The woman's expression changed. "Who made this?" Theo's face went red. "I did." She looked at him, then back at the painting. "How old are you?" 16. "And this is oil, mostly," he said, barely audible. "Some acrylic underpainting. I used charcoal first." Her fingers hovered near the surface without touching. "You built the shadow in layers." Theo glanced up despite himself. The window looked wrong if it was just black. "It would have," she said. "But this isn't black." She turned to me. "I can clean the corner. But I'd like someone else to see this before I do anything." Theo stiffened. "Why?" "Because I own a framing shop," she said gently. "My brother owns a gallery." I felt Theo's panic before he moved. "No," he said. "Mom." "No." I stepped closer to him. "We don't have to do anything." The woman lifted both hands. "No pressure. Truly. I'm Clara Reed. My brother Julian works with contemporary artists. Sometimes young artists too. He is very good at looking without making people feel small." Theo's mouth tightened. That sentence had found the wound directly. "People say that," he muttered. Clara did not pretend not to understand. "Yes, they do." She picked up her phone from the counter but waited. She looked at me, then at Theo. "May I send him a photo? Just one. If he is interested, you can say no." Theo stared at the painting. I could see the battle in him wanting the world to disappear, wanting someone to undo what Vivian had done, hating himself for wanting that. Finally, he shrugged. "Whatever." I touched his sleeve. "That is not consent." He exhaled. "Fine. Yes. One photo." Clara took the photo carefully. Straight on. No flash. Then she sent it and turned back to the damaged corner. What happened here? Theo looked away. I answered, because he should not have had to. It was thrown into a trash bin. Clara's face went still. Not shocked in a performative way. Still. By accident, no. She looked at Theo then. And her voice softened. I'm sorry. Theo swallowed. It's okay. No. Clara said. As gently as I had said it in the car. It is not. He blinked. And for the first time since my mother's birthday, someone else's kindness seemed to reach him before he could block it. Clara cleaned the frosting smear with slow, careful movements. She did not overpraise. She did not gush. She asked Theo about the porch swing, the window, the color under the eaves. At first, he answered in 1 or 2 words, then in sentences. Then he told her he had painted the house from old photographs because the real one had been renovated until it looked like it did not remember us anymore. Clara paused at that. That's why the window looks away, she said. Theo looked startled. Yeah. The bell over the door rang again, 40 minutes later. A man in a charcoal coat stepped inside, slightly out of breath, with rain on his shoulders and his eyes already searching the shop. Clara glanced at me. That's Julian. Theo moved behind me half a step. Julian Reed approached the table, nodded once to Clara, then looked at the painting. He did not speak for a long time. My stomach tightened with every silent second. Then he leaned closer and said, almost to himself, this is not a school project. Theo's fingers curled around the cuff of his hoodie. Julian looked up at him. This is a voice. The shop went quiet. Outside. Cars moved through wet streets. Inside. My son stood in front of the painting his grandmother had called cheap trash, while a stranger looked at it like it had spoken. Julian did not ask how much we wanted for it. He did not ask who Theo knew. He did not ask whether our family had money, connections, or the right last name. He only asked, do you have more work? Theo hesitated. Some. May I see it sometime? Theo looked at me. I let the choice stay where it belonged. After a long moment, he said, maybe. Julian smiled. Small and respectful. Maybe is enough for today. I looked at grandmother's window under the clean white shop light. For the first time since Vivian's dining room, the painting did not look rescued from trash. It looked like it had been waiting to be found. Theo did not show Julian Reed more work that day. He barely spoke in the car afterward. But it was a different kind of silence than the one that had followed my mother's birthday dinner. That silence had been a locked door. This one was a window cracked open just enough to let air in. He held Clara's framing receipt in his lap and kept looking down at it like it might disappear if he stopped checking. Under description, Clara had written original oil and acrylic on canvas. Artist Theo Carter. Not school project. Not homemade gift. Not cheap trash. Artist. She didn't have to write that. Theo said after 10 minutes. No. I said. She chose to. He looked out the window. Do you think Mr. Muster the Mashins? Reed was just being nice. No. You don't know that. I know the difference between nice and interested. He did not answer. But his fingers relaxed around the paper. Over the next week, the painting stayed at Clara's shop for cleaning and framing. Theo pretended not to care. He asked once if she had called. Then again the next day. Then, by Thursday, he was standing beside me when my phone rang, trying very hard to look like he had only wandered into the kitchen for water. Clara said the painting was ready, but Julian would also be there if Theo was comfortable speaking with him. Theo's face went pale. We can just pick it up, I told him. He stared at the floor. What would he ask probably about your work? What if I sound stupid? Then he'll survive. That made his mouth twitch. Barely. But it was the first almost smile I had seen since Vivian dropped his canvas into the trash. We went Saturday morning. Grandmother's window was waiting on an easel near the back of the shop. Cleaned and set inside a simple dark wood frame Clara said would stay out of the painting's way. Theo stopped walking when he saw it. So did I. Framed. It no longer looked like a rescued gift. It looked deliberate. The old house seemed deeper. The window darker. The crooked porch swing lonelier. The frame did not make it expensive. It made people understand they were supposed to stop and look. Julian was already there, standing a respectful distance away, with a small leather notebook in his hand. "Theo," he said. "Thank you for coming back." Theo nodded, hands buried in his hoodie pocket. Julian did not rush. He asked about the materials first, then the photographs Theo used, then the choice to make the window almost but not completely black. Theo answered quietly at first. Then, little by little, he forgot to be afraid. He talked about mixing green from gray and yellow because the house in the old photos looked like it was pretending to be cheerful. He talked about leaving part of the porch unfinished because memory never filled in evenly. He talked about painting the window last because he could not decide whether the person inside was watching or refusing to watch. Julian listened like every answer mattered, not like an adult entertaining a teenager, like a curator hearing an artist explain his own weather. Finally, Julian closed his notebook. "I'm putting together a small exhibition in January," he said. "Young outsider and emerging artists. No pressure. But I would like to include this piece, if you're willing." Theo's face changed so quickly it hurt. Hope arrived before he could defend himself from it. Then fear followed. People would see it. Yes. Like strangers. Mostly strangers. Theo looked at me. I kept my face still, though inside I wanted to say yes for him. To grab the invitation before the world remembered how cruel it could be. But the painting was his. The risk had to be his too. "What if they laugh?" he asked. Julian's expression softened, but his answer did not. "Some people might not understand it. That is not the same as laughing. And even if someone does laugh, that would not tell us anything about the work. It would tell us about the person laughing." Theo looked down. I thought of Vivian at the dining table, calling honesty gloomy because she had recognized herself in the dark window and hated the reflection. "My grandmother laughed," Theo said. The shop went still. Julian did not ask for the story, which made me grateful. He only said, "Then your grandmother was not the right audience." Theo looked up at him. Something landed. Not healed. Landed. Clara brought out the paperwork. Simple and clear consent for exhibition. No sale without written approval from Theo and me. Insurance value modest but respectful. Transport handled by Julian's gallery. I read every line twice. After my mother, I had no patience for adults who used children's trust as decoration. Julian waited without offense. "Take it home," he said. "Think about it." But Theo reached for the pen. His hand shook a little when he signed. Not because he was weak, because courage often looks exactly like fear until the ink dries. That evening, after we brought grandmother's window home, Theo asked if we could hang it in the hallway instead of hiding it behind my desk. I held the nail while he measured the wall. Both of us pretending the moment was practical so it would not become too heavy to carry. When it was up, he stood back and stared at it for a long time. "It looks different," he said. How he tilted his head. Like it survived her. I swallowed hard. It did. He looked at me then. And for the first time since Vivian's birthday, his eyes were clear. Maybe I did too. I wanted to hug him, but I knew better than to turn his strength into my comfort. So I only nodded. "Maybe you did." 2 weeks later, The exhibition announcement went online. Theo's name appeared between artists twice his age, beside a small photo of grandmother's window. Monica saw it first. She sent me a screenshot with one line, "Is this Theo's painting?" I looked at the message. Then at the framed canvas in our hallway. This time, I did not feel the old pull to explain. I typed back only yes. Then I turned off my phone, because I knew exactly who she was about to tell. The exhibition opened on a Friday evening in January, in a narrow white gallery with polished concrete floors, soft track lighting, and windows that reflected the city like another room full of strangers. Theo wore the only blazer he owned and kept tugging at the sleeves as if the fabric were accusing him of pretending to be someone else. "We can leave whenever you want," I told him outside the entrance. He looked through the glass at the people already moving inside with small cups of wine and serious faces. "What if no one stops at it? Then we go home. Order noodles. And the painting still matters." He swallowed. "What if everyone stops?" I smiled a little. "Then we still order noodles." That almost made him laugh. Almost. Julian met us near the door, dressed in black, calm as ever. He did not clap Theo on the back, or call him a genius, or make him feel like a child being shown off. He simply said, "Your work is on the east wall. Good light. Enough space." Theo nodded, too nervous to answer. I followed him into the gallery and saw grandmother's window from across the room. For a second, I forgot to breathe. Clara's frame had made people stop, but Julian's lighting made the painting speak. The old house seemed to lean out of the wall. The dark upstairs window held the room quietly hostage. The crooked porch swing looked less like furniture and more like a question no one had answered in years. Theo stopped beside me. "It looks too big," he whispered. "It is the same size." "No," he said. "I mean, it looks like it knows people are watching." I looked at him. Maybe it always did. At first, people moved through the room politely. They paused, read labels, tilted heads, murmured comments that made Theo's ears turn red. His label read Theo Carter. Chalou. Grandmother's window. Oil. Acrylic. Charcoal on canvas. Collection of the artist. No mention of Vivian. No mention of the trash bin. No family history dressed up for sympathy. Just his name and the work. That was enough. Then a woman in a long black coat stopped in front of the painting and did not move. I noticed her because everyone else seemed to notice her. Julian crossed the room, not too quickly, and spoke to her in a low voice. She ignored him for almost 30 seconds, eyes fixed on the upstairs window. Finally, she said, "Who is Theo Carter?" Theo went completely still beside me. Julian turned and gestured gently toward us. "He is." The woman came over. She was older, with silver hair cut blunt at her jaw and a face that looked used to being listened to. "I'm Margaret Vale," she said. Theo blinked like the name meant something. It meant nothing to me then. Later, I learned it meant a great deal to people who collected art. "You painted that?" she asked. Theo nodded. "Yes. From life, no. From old photographs and stories." Whose house? He hesitated, then said, "My grandmother's old house." Margaret looked back at the painting. "Does she know you saw it this clearly?" The question was so precise it hurt. Theo's throat moved. She didn't like it. Margaret's expression did not change, but something sharpened in her eyes. That happens when portraits are accurate. She handed Julian her card before leaving and said, "Call me before this young man disappears into a school system that tells him to paint brighter." By the end of the night, 3 people had asked whether grandmother's window was for sale. Julian said no each time without looking at me for permission, because the paperwork was clear: no sale without Theo and me. A small arts journalist took notes in front of the painting for 20 minutes. A photographer asked Theo to stand beside it. Theo said no. I loved him for that. The article came out the next morning with the headline, "Young Painter Finds the Wound Inside a Family House." The piece called Grandmother's Window, the emotional center of the show, and described Theo's work as startlingly mature, intimate without sentimentality, and impossible to dismiss. Theo read it at the kitchen table 3 times, pretending each time was accidental. Impossible to dismiss, he said quietly. I poured him orange juice. That part was my favorite too. By noon, Monica had sent me the link with 6 question marks. I did not answer. 10 minutes later, she wrote, "Mom wants to know if that's the same painting." I looked down the hallway at the empty space where Grandmother's window had hung before the exhibition. Then I typed yes. The phone rang almost instantly. Monica. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom called. I let that go too. Her voicemail arrived in a clipped, offended tone. Elena. I'm not sure what kind of game you're playing. But if that article is about Theodore's painting, you should have told me before letting strangers exaggerate it. Theodore. She used his full name only when she wanted authority over him. That evening, Monica called again. And this time I answered. Mom is upset, she said. I almost laughed. That seems to be her main hobby. She says the article makes it sound like she rejected some masterpiece with fix provox 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 provox. She did. Monica lowered her voice. She said that cannot be the same ugly painting. I looked toward Theo's room. His door was open. For once, no torn sketches sat in his trash can. And what did you say? Monica was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, I told her. Mum, it is. I closed my eyes. Not forgiveness. Not trust. But one truthful sentence had finally left someone else's mouth. Across town, my mother was probably staring at that article, trying to force the world back into her dining room where she controlled the value of things. But for the first time, Vivian Hartley was not looking at Theo's painting as trash. She was looking at it as something other people might value without her permission. The calls did not stop after the article. They changed shape. At first, my mother called with outrage. Then, confusion. Then the soft, wounded tone she used when she realized anger was not opening the door fast enough. I let every call go to voicemail. Theo asked once if Grandma had apologized. I told him the truth. No. She has noticed other people like your painting. He nodded, like he had expected nothing better. But I saw the sentence settle in him anyway. Recognition was not the same as love. Sometimes it was just greed wearing glasses. Julian called 3 days after the exhibition closed. His voice was careful, professional, but I could hear something underneath it. Elena, are you sitting down? I looked across my desk at the stack of grant reports I was supposed to be reviewing. That is rarely how good conversations start. Harrington Auction House reached out. I went still. For Theo for Grandmother's Window, I stood instead of sitting. Why Margaret Vale mentioned the work to 2 collectors. The article circulated. Harrington is preparing a spring sale focused on contemporary memory and domestic space. They want to discuss including Theo's painting. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 6 months ago, my biggest concern had been whether I could afford new tires and Theo's summer art program. Now, a major auction house wanted the painting my mother had dropped into a trash bin beside birthday napkins and frosting. He's 16, I said, because it was the only solid thing I could grab. I know. Julian said, that is why I'm calling you first. Do not agree to anything quickly. Get an attorney. Set up protections. Make sure Theo understands the difference between attention and pressure. I closed my eyes. For the first time since meeting Julian, I trusted him completely, not because he had praised my son, but because he had slowed the room down when everyone else was trying to speed toward value. I'll talk to Theo, I said. And Elena, yes. Your mother called my gallery this morning. My hand tightened around the phone. Of course she did. She introduced herself as Theo's grandmother and asked whether family representatives could attend future meetings. A cold little laugh left me. Family representatives. I told her all communication goes through you. Thank you. She did not like that. She rarely likes doors she doesn't own. When I told Theo about Harrington, he did not look happy at first. He looked frightened. They want to sell it, they want to ask if you would consider it. He looked down the hallway where grandmother's window had hung before Julian's exhibition. The wall was still bare. A pale rectangle marking where the painting had been. What happens if it sells? That depends on what you want. Nothing happens without your consent. He was quiet for a long time. Would Grandma get money? The question hit me harder than the auction house call. Not because it was complicated, because it was the first thing he feared. No, I said. Not 1 cent. His shoulders lowered just slightly. Would she get to say it was hers? No. Would she get to come? I hesitated. Auction houses are public in some ways, but she will not be part of the contract. The sale, the press, or your story, unless you choose that. Theo looked at me. I don't choose that. Then that's the answer. The next week, I met with an attorney named Mara Singh, who specialized in art contracts and minors' rights. I brought every document Julian had given me. The exhibition agreement, the article, Clara's framing receipt, photographs of the painting before and after cleaning. And, because I had learned from my mother, screenshots of the texts from Monica and Vivian's voicemail transcript. Mara read everything with a pen in her hand and a face that showed nothing until she reached my mother's message. She called it cheap trash, in front of everyone. Mara underlined something on her legal pad. Then we make sure she never gets close enough to call it family property. Within days, Theo had a protected trust, clear authorship documentation, a contract requiring my approval for all negotiations until he turned 18, and a clause stating no extended family member had authority to speak, sign, represent, or receive proceeds on his behalf. When Harrington sent their preliminary proposal, Mara reviewed it line by line. Julian sat beside Theo and explained every word without making him feel small for asking questions. That mattered. By the end of the meeting, Theo understood more about reserve prices, provenance, insurance, and artist rights than my mother had ever understood about value. Vivian called the night the auction announcement went public. This time, I answered. Not because I wanted to hear her voice, but because I wanted to know which mask she had chosen. Elena, she said warmly. Too warmly. I think we should all sit down and celebrate as a family. I looked at the Harrington catalog proof on my laptop. Theo Carter. Grandmother's window. Courtesy of the artist and Elena Carter. Celebrate what? I asked. How? Of course. This is wonderful news. You threw his gift away as a family too. Silence. Then her voice tightened. I made a mistake. No. You made a judgment. Other people disagreed with it publicly. That is cruel. No. Mom. Cruel was the trash bin. This is paperwork. She breathed in sharply. I am his grandmother. I thought of Theo's cold hand in mine as we left her dining room. You were his grandmother when he handed you the painting. This time, when I hung up, I did not feel shaky. I opened the final auction paperwork, checked Theo's trust documents one more time, and signed where Mara had marked. My mother had thrown away a painting because she thought value was something she got to assign. Now the world was about to put a number beside it. And for the first time in her life, Vivian Hartley had no place at the table where the price would be decided. Harrington Auction House did not look like the kind of place where something rescued from a trash bin should have ended up. The building had marble steps, brass doors, and a lobby, so quiet even footsteps sounded expensive. Theo stood beside me in a charcoal sweater, his hands tucked into his sleeves, staring at the enormous banner near the entrance, Spring Contemporary Sale Memory. House and Self. His name appeared halfway down the list of featured artists. Theo Carter. 6 months earlier, he had asked if his painting was really that bad. Now strangers in tailored coats were walking past his name with catalog numbers in their hands. "Still want to go in?" I asked. He nodded. But his voice was thin. "Yeah." Mara Singh met us inside with a leather folder under one arm and the expression of a woman prepared to sue the wallpaper if it violated a clause. Julian was already near the preview room, speaking with a Harrington representative. When he saw Theo, he came over immediately. "The painting is installed in Gallery 2. He said. "You do not have to speak to anyone unless you want to. Mara and I will handle questions." Theo nodded. "Is Margaret Vale here?" "She is." Julian's mouth curved slightly. "She has already told 3 people not to stand too close to the canvas." That made Theo relax a fraction. We entered Gallery 2 together. Grandmother's window hung alone on a pale wall with enough space around it to make the room feel like it was holding its breath. Beneath it was a small plaque, Theo Carter. Grandmother's window. Oil. Acrylic. And charcoal on canvas. Estimate available upon request. Provenance collection of the artist. Courtesy of Theo Carter and Elena Carter. Not Hartley family collection. Not gift of Vivian Hartley. Not discovered by grandmother. Not lovingly encouraged by extended family. Just Theo and me. The truth. Framed better than any apology my mother had ever offered. People stopped in front of the painting in quiet clusters. Some leaned closer. Some stepped back. One man read the catalog description aloud under his breath, a meditation on domestic memory. Withheld tenderness. And the architecture of emotional absence. Theo looked at me. Startled. "Is that what I did?" I whispered. "Apparently." He looked back at the painting. "I just painted her window. Sometimes that's enough." Then I heard my mother's voice. Of course I did. Vivian Hartley had never entered a room without trying to become its centerpiece. She stood near the doorway in a cream suit. Pearls at her throat. Monica beside her looking uncomfortable enough to be honest for once. Mom was speaking to a woman holding a bitter paddle packet. "My grandson is very gifted," she said warmly. "We always encouraged his creativity." My body went still. Theo heard it too. His face closed like a curtain. Mara turned her head slowly. Julian's expression cooled. My mother had not seen us yet. She continued, smiling with the easy confidence of someone who believed public lies became real if delivered elegantly. "He painted that for me originally," she said. "A family piece. You know, very personal." I felt Theo step half an inch closer to me. That was enough. I walked toward her. Monica saw me first and whispered, "Mom?" Vivian turned. For 1 second, panic crossed her face. Then she recovered and opened her arms slightly, as if we were in the middle of a touching reunion instead of a controlled public correction. "Elena," she said. "Theo, there you are. I was just telling people how proud we are." I looked at the woman beside her. Then at my mother. "That is inaccurate." Vivian's smile froze. "Excuse me, Mara appeared at my side before I even had to look for her. She held out a catalog. Open to Theo's page. For clarity, Mara said. Polite enough to be dangerous. The artist is represented by his mother, Elena Carter, and protected through a minor's trust. No extended family member has authority to speak on behalf of the artist. The work, or it provenance. The woman with the bitter packet looked suddenly fascinated. Vivian's cheeks colored. I am his grandmother. Theo's voice, quiet but clear, answered before I could. You were also the person who threw it away. The room did not stop. Exactly. But the air around us sharpened. Monica closed her eyes. Vivian looked at Theo like he had slapped her, which was rich coming from a woman who had once dropped his heart into a silver trash bin. Theodore, she whispered. This is not the place. He swallowed, but he did not look away. Neither was your birthday dinner. For the first time, my son did not sound like a child asking to be chosen. He sounded like an artist refusing to be edited. Julian stepped smoothly between Theo and the gathering attention. Theo, Margaret is asking for you near the catalog table. Only if you are comfortable. Theo looked at me. I nodded. He walked away with Julian. Shoulders tense but unbroken. My mother watched him go, then turned on me in a low voice. Are you happy? You've taught him to humiliate his own grandmother. I looked at grandmother's window across the room, glowing under museum-quality light. No. Mum, you taught him what humiliation looks like. I taught him not to confuse it with love. Mara closed the catalog gently. Mrs. Hartley. Any further public misrepresentation may affect your access to future events involving the artist. Vivian stared at her. You cannot keep me from my grandson, I said. Theo can. That sentence did what no argument ever had. It made her quiet. Laughter. As the preview continued, I saw my mother seated in the front row of the auction room. Posture perfect. Face tight. Trying to look like she belonged to the painting's rise instead of its wound, but the catalog in every bidder's hand told the truth. The wall label told the truth. Theo had told the truth. Vivian Hartley had come to Harrington hoping to stand beside value after throwing it away. Instead, she had to sit in the front row and watch the world admire what she had called cheap trash. The auction room filled slowly, but the air changed the moment people began taking their seats. Preview chatter became measured silence. Catalogs opened. Phones were lowered. Bidders settled into rows with the calm faces of people prepared to spend more money in 10 minutes than I had earned in years. Theo sat between me and Julian. His hands folded so tightly in his lap that I could see the pale lines around his knuckles. Mara sat on my other side with the trust documents in her folder. Calm and watchful. 2 rows ahead. My mother sat in the front row beside Monica, her cream suit immaculate, her pearls glowing under the lights, her posture arranged to suggest dignity instead of desperation. She had not looked back at us once. That was Vivian Hartley's specialty, pretending not to see the people she had already hurt until they became useful. The first lots passed in a blur. A sculpture sold for $80,000. A large abstract canvas reached $320,000. People nodded, lifted paddles, whispered into phones. Theo watched everything like he was trying to understand a foreign ritual. This is weird, he whispered. Yes, I said. Very. What if nobody bids? Julian leaned in slightly. Then the painting comes home with you. Theo breathed out. And if they do, I squeezed his hand. Then we breathed through that too. Lot 42 appeared on the screen. Theo Carter. Grandmother's window. A professional photograph of the painting filled the wall behind the auctioneer. Larger than life. The dark upstairs window staring over a room of people who had paid for the privilege of looking The auctioneer introduced Theo as an emerging young artist whose work had drawn remarkable collector attention after Julian Reed's January exhibition. Theo stared down at his shoes. My mother finally turned her head just enough to glance toward us. Not at Theo's face. At the room's reaction to him, the bidding opened at $100,000. My breath stopped. Theo's hand jerked in mine. A paddle lifted near the aisle. Then another. 120. 150. 175. The numbers moved too quickly to feel real. My mother sat rigid in the front row. Hair profile frozen. Monica covered her mouth with one hand. At 300,000. Theo whispered. Mom. I leaned closer. I'm here. At 500,000. The room sharpened. At 750. Someone on the phone entered. At 900. Margaret Vale lifted her paddle for the first time. Calm as if she were ordering tea. The auctioneer's voice grew brighter. 1 million. A soft ripple passed through the room. Theo stopped breathing for a second. I felt it. I held his hand harder. My mother turned fully now. Eyes wide. No longer able to pretend this was just a misunderstanding, made dramatic by strangers. 1 million became 1.2. 1.5. 1.8. Every number struck the room like a hammer before the hammer even fell. I thought of the silver trash bin at Vivian's birthday dinner. The frosting smear on the corner. Theo asking, was it really that bad? My mother saying she had no space for cheap trash. Now an entire auction house had made space for it. And the world was answering in dollars because that was the only language Vivian had ever respected. At 2 million. Theo's eyes filled. I don't want to cry here. He whispered. Then don't. I whispered back. Or do. Either is allowed. Julian looked straight ahead. But his jaw was tight with emotion. Mara quietly slid a tissue into Theo's hand without making a ceremony of it. The bidding slowed at 2.4 million. Then Margaret Vale lifted her paddle again. 2.5. A phone bidder answered. 2.6. Another pause. The auctioneer scanned the room. 2.7 million. Silence stretched. Then, from the back, a paddle rose. 2.8 million. The room held still. The auctioneer waited. No one moved. Fair warning. My mother's hand gripped the edge of her chair. Sold. The auctioneer said, bringing the hammer down. For $2.8 million. The sound was smaller than I expected. The aftershock was not. Applause broke out. Polite at first. Then warmer as people turned toward Theo. He folded forward. Face in his hands. Overwhelmed. I put my arm around him and felt him shake. You're okay. I whispered. You're okay. Across the aisle. Vivian stood too quickly. Monica caught her elbow. But Mom shook her off and came toward us before anyone could stop her. Mara rose first. Then Julian. My mother did not even look at them. Her eyes were on me, shining now with tears she had not spent on Theo when he was hurt. Elena, she whispered. Please. I stood slowly. Theo remained seated, wiping his face, refusing to look at her. Please, what I asked. Vivian glanced around at the collectors. The staff. The people still watching. Her voice lowered. Tell them. Tell them I'm his grandmother. There it was. Not I'm sorry I hurt him. Not as Theo. Okay, not I was wrong. Tell them I'm his grandmother. I looked at the woman who had thrown my son's heart into a trash bin and now wanted a seat beside the price tag. You were his grandmother when he handed it to you, I said. Her face crumpled. But I did not soften. That was the moment that mattered. Not this one. Behind me. Theo took my hand again. This time, his grip was steady. The painting had sold for $2. 8 millions. But the most valuable thing in that room was not the money. It was the look on my son's face when he realized the person who threw him away no longer got to define what he was worth. After the hammer fell, everyone wanted a piece of the story. That was the strange part. Not the money. Not the cameras. Not the way Harrington's staff suddenly treated my 16-year-old son like a fragile national treasure. The strange part was how quickly people gathered around value once someone else had named it. Collectors wanted to shake Theo's hand. A journalist wanted a quote. A photographer asked for just one picture with the artist. Mara stepped between them with a smile, sharp enough to cut glass. The artist is a minor and will not be making statements tonight. Theo sat beside me, pale and stunned, still holding my hand like he had when he was little and afraid of crossing busy streets. Across the room, Vivian stood frozen near the aisle. No longer crying. No longer begging. The room. Vivian stood frozen near the aisle. No longer crying, just watching as access closed around her. Monica stood beside her, face drawn and quiet. For once, she did not defend our mother. That silence was not courage. But it was a beginning. Julian guided us through a side exit into a private room where the noise became muffled behind thick doors. Theo sank into a chair. Is it real? He asked. Mara placed the final sale sheet on the table. It is real. Nothing moves until the buyer's funds clear. And the proceeds go into the trust according to the agreement. Theo stared at the number printed beside his name. Armayuen. Babe. Ling ling ling. I don't feel different. I brushed his hair back from his forehead. Good. He looked at me. Should I? No. Money changes what you can protect. It does not get to change who you are. He nodded slowly, as if placing that sentence somewhere safe. 2 hours later, after statements were declined, documents were reviewed, and Julian promised to call in the morning. We left through the back entrance. Vivian was waiting by the car. Of course she was. Her pearls were slightly crooked now. Her lipstick had faded. For the first time in my life, my mother looked less polished than desperate. Elena, she said. Please. Just 5 minutes. Theo stopped beside me. I looked at him first. Do you want to hear this? He did not look at her. No. That was all I needed. I opened the passenger door. Get in. Vivian's face tightened. You're really going to keep my grandson from me, Theo turned then. His voice was quiet, but it did not shake. You threw away the last thing I gave you. My mother flinched. Theo. I made one mistake. He looked at her with a sadness, too old for 16. No. You made me understand. Then he got into the car and closed the door. I faced my mother alone. You wanted me to tell them you were his grandmother. I said, so here is the truth. You were his grandmother at your birthday dinner. You were his grandmother. When he wrapped that painting with blue string, you were his grandmother when he stood in front of everyone, hoping you would see him. You were his grandmother when you chose the trash bin. Her eyes filled again. I didn't know. That is not an excuse. That is the confession. For once, she had no clean answer. No polished sigh. No wounded performance that could move the blame back into my hands. I got into the car and drove away while she stood under the auction house lights, surrounded by marble, brass, and the price tag she had finally understood too late. In the weeks that followed, Vivian tried every door. She sent flowers. Mara returned them. She wrote Theo a letter beginning with, My dearest artistic grandson, and he placed it unopened on my desk. She told Monica to ask whether we would consider a family dinner. Monica, to her credit, replied, Mom, "You should have eaten with him before he was famous." That sentence made its way back to me. And for the first time in years, I almost respected my sister. The money cleared into Theo's trust. We paid off my debts, funded his education, set aside money for future studios and legal protection, and donated quietly to a community art program for kids whose families could not afford supplies. Theo insisted on that. Somebody should get paint before they have to prove they're good. He said, that was when I knew my son had survived without becoming hard in the places Vivian wanted to bruise. Months later, I framed 2 photographs and hung them in my office. One was the only picture I had taken of grandmother's window before Clara cleaned it, with a faint frosting smear still visible in the corner. The other was the Harrington catalog page showing Theo's name, the title, and the final sale record. Trash bin and auction catalog, side by side. Not because I wanted to worship money, but because I wanted proof of the distance between my mother's judgment and the truth. Vivian sent one final letter near the end of summer. I made one mistake. She wrote, "I hope you do not punish me forever for one moment." I read it once, then handed it to Theo. He read it too. Expression calm. She still thinks the mistake was throwing it away after it became valuable. He said, "Not throwing it away when it was mine." I looked at him, proud and heartbroken at the same time. "Yes." He gave the letter back. "I don't want to answer." "Then we won't." That night, Theo started a new canvas. Not another house. Not another window. Something larger. Warmer. Full of color, he mixed himself because store-bought green still did not look like memory. My mother threw away my son's painting because it looked cheap. 6 months later, strangers saw what she refused to see, not trash. Not a school project. Not a poor boy's homemade gift. But the heart of a child who had offered her love before he ever offered the world genius. Vivian wanted forgiveness after the auction because the world had placed a number on what she discarded. But my son's worth had never been waiting for a bidder. It had been there the whole time, wrapped in brown paper, tied with blue string, and held out to a grandmother who chose not to see it. There are gifts children give before they know how cruel adults can be. They do not wrap them in expensive paper. They wrap them in hope. That is why a careless word at the wrong table can do more damage than the person speaking it will ever admit. It can teach a child to hide the part of himself that was brave enough to create. So I became careful about the rooms I allowed my son's heart to enter. Not every relative deserves access to a child's unfinished courage. Not every opinion deserves to become a lesson. A parent's duty is not to make a child tougher for cruel people. It is to stand between the cruelty and the child long enough for him to learn the truth. His work had value before strangers praised it, before collectors named it, and before money gave the world permission to notice. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.